wanted to I wanted to start this with saying you're one of the only people I can think of that's doing what we do at a really at a high level in Nashville that nobody has one bad thing to say about.
Oh man, that's so nice to hear. I'm
And
sure you could find somebody.
well, I have not, and I've been around a lot of people that say a lot of things about a lot of people. And I just what's your secret to that? Because that's remarkable, especially in a town like Nashville. I feel like it can be kind of, some people can be a little shitty about things, but
Yeah, I mean, I think um I see, I see Reed Chipman post this a lot, and I think this is he has one saying, and I'm sure it's not his saying, but it's just man, I'm gonna botch the quote, but it's something um something about being kind because everybody's going through their own struggle.
mm-hmm.
And it's just keeping empathy at the forefront of your mind and all of your interactions and being man, if someone's having a shitty day, it's not about you. That's about somebody else. And
Yeah,
really, we have the ability to change our reality through love and compassion.
yeah,
And it's not an easy transformation to make to keeping those things in the forefront of your mind, but they really are kind of magical qualities to try to inhabit
yeah,
that, along with gratitude. And you can allow space for where people are emotionally, but you don't have to. I don't ever. I don't really feel like I have to engage in it, and in
mm,
fact, um, I can just hold space and do my best. Do my best to show them that they are loved.
yeah. That's a really a remarkably wise way of going about it. I mean, it took me a really long time being an assistant and an intern to realize half the time when people are having a blow up, it's not about what you did or about you personally. It's about what they're going through. The pressure that they're under or all the other stuff that they got going on at home that you don't know about, that they don't bring into work. And it takes a long time to come around to those types of, that way of thinking. And it's interesting to talk about with people because I feel like that's not a belief or a way of thinking that's particularly held by a lot of people I've worked with. So it's just
It's
something I wanted to talk about here.
Yeah, I mean, I think it might be more important than the music you're creating in a way because Gabe Simon, and he
Oh yeah.
speaks super highly of you. We were talking the other day, and we were talking about what we are actually selling when we are selling a song.
Yeah.
And this idea is that we upload to Spotify, we want people to listen to the music, and that's the product. The product is the song. And it's man, I don't think that's the truth. I think the truth of what, as we are salesmen of our music or peddlers of our music, what we are actually selling is an emotion.
Mm.
And the song is the conduit to which we deliver that emotion.
Yeah.
And so follow that back all the way to the creation. If we are uh you know if the correct intention of the emotion is not being poured in to the creation of the music,
Right.
how in the fuck do you expect the listener to receive that emotion?
Yeah.
And it's man, if people are having just a shit day and they're in their heads and beating themselves up, or however that manifests in someone's life, well, we're already missing the point of music.
100%. I couldn't agree more. Especially, I mean, you think about the way that that music is sort of treated. I'd say maybe top 40 music, not music in general, because there's a lot of really great music being made, but there's a lot of music that's it's almost created to be disposable in a way, or we're going for TikTok views, or we're going for this, or the next quick viral dance or something, and I don't feel like the amount of love and care is being put into that, like you're saying, where it's is the intention right from the beginning, and it goes back to something that I've really tried to take on in the last like year of being a producer or an engineer or even just mixer as just being a guide to their journey of like, this isn't about me. A lot of engineers, well, at least some of the bigger ones can put themselves in front of the project, you know.
It's easy to do.
It is. It's very easy to do because this is your livelihood and this is, you know, you want your stamp to be on it. But to just take a step back and be like, I'm here to help guide them to where they want to get and get what's in here out into the world in the best way I can. And me putting myself in front of that is not going to be the way to do that. And I've noticed a big change in the way things have gone, just taking, at least being mindful of that, you know. It's interesting. But I wanted to talk to you, what originally got you into music? Like, what age did you get the bug?
Man, probably as a teenager, I started going to church, and I like loved music through church. And though I don't really connect to church or music in that way, it was definitely a catalyst for like picking up a guitar and learning the guitar. And you know, because it's like when you're in a big group, concerts are kind of the same as church. You're in a big room with a bunch of people, and there is a
shared
spirit
experience
of something flowing.
Yeah.
And so it's like, you know, I kind of caught that bug through that way, and led some worship in high school and in college, and did some Young Life camps, and you know, decided that I wanted to do music. Now I moved down here in 2005, and then met my first roommate, and we were kind of sitting around trading songs, and he it was his turn. He started playing and singing, and I was like, holy shit, like this is he was so good, and still is so good. His name's Aaron Roach. And it's like, this is the first person I've come across, and he's so much better than me at everything that like I'm not gonna do what he does. I'm never gonna do what he does.
Yeah.
So like, you know, and I had been interested in engineering when I moved down here, but it's like I need to radically shift my expectations of what I'm going to do in this scene, because like this is crazy.
Yeah.
Like I can't dream of it.
Right.
Or it's gonna take a long time
right.
for me to develop what he has.
For sure.
So that spurred me into engineering specifically.
Really? Yeah.
What about you?
That's so funny you say that. Well, I'll circle back to that, but you saying that reminds me of the very first time I walked into a Guitar Center in Nashville, and it's the Guitar Center on right by Berry Hill, and I was just kind of perusing around, and I hear somebody just ripping Cliffs of Dover, like Eric Johnson, and I'm like, holy shit. And I like come around the corner, it's like an 8-year-old kid, and I'm like, well, fuck, I'm done. Like I didn't come here to play guitar, but it was one of those things of like, yeah, just never mention you play guitar in this town.
No,
never.
People ask, they go, what do you play? I'm like, well, I'm friends with like Ian Fitchick and Todd Lombardo, and like I know all the session players, so they play.
Yeah.
I can make sounds.
Yeah.
And record those sounds, and then at the end it resembles music.
Sure, right. Yeah. I can make a really good call to somebody and be like, hey, I need you to do this. Yeah, Ian's such a good example of that, where you're like, oh yeah, we hired him come play drums, and and then the drum takes over and he's in the corner on a keyboard, and you're like, holy shit, he's ripping the keyboard. It's like, yeah, let's lay that down. And then 10 minutes later he's walking around with an acoustic. You're like, well, yeah, put that on too. Like, what? And then you're just like,
yeah, one man band.
Yeah, that's there's so many people like that in Nashville, and that's why I'm just like, nah, I don't do that. I'm on this side of the glass, and then
sure,
yeah. But I guess what got me into music in high school was like, my dad like I grew up around music. I love music. I always like thinking back. I knew somewhere in there that that's kind of what I wanted to do. Like I always had like a shitty plastic guitar that I had no idea how to play, but I wanted to, you know. I always wanted to play drums and stuff, but my dad would never buy them because he was a drummer and knew how loud and chaotic that was going to be. But I remember, and this is such a like cliche rock and roll thing, but I was sitting in the back seat of my dad's truck when we were waiting to like pick up food, and he had just like put in a Van Halen record, and I'd never heard anything like that. Grew up on like country music, and like Mean Streets came on, and I was like frozen in where I was. I was like, what is going on? Like, what is this? It's got that crazy weird tap thing. And then from there, it was just like, okay, well, I'm gonna learn guitar, and then that just, you know.
Isn't that crazy how just really like I don't know if there's I'm trying to think maybe nature, like maybe going out into nature provides a similar experience, but like there's nothing like being affected by a song.
No.
Like there's nothing. It just freezes you in the track. Like talking about that reminded me, and this is actually when I wanted to be an engineer. I was working at Best Buy in Kansas City. That's where I'm from.
Okay.
And I was like in the television section or something. I was the worst salesman. I was horrible. But this dude who I worked with was like, man, you got to come over here and hear this.
Yeah.
And we had a little music 5.1 set up when they were trying to peddle that stuff.
Yeah.
And I sat down. He put in Sea Change, that Beck record.
Oh yeah, yeah.
In 5.1, and I was just sat there and I listened to the whole thing. And I was working, and I got in trouble. But like, it blew me away. I was like, I don't understand. And that record still blows me away. It's one of my favorite records. But,
yeah,
similar as you, man. I was just like, I have to do this.
Right. I'm sure
I have to find a way to do this.
Yeah, I'm sure that even because you had such a profound experience with that record, you can still revisit that and have like sort of tap into that same amount of like awe and inspiration too. Because I do that too. I mean, in fact, you know, like when I was playing guitar, I was always recording like myself with a cassette player or something because I have insane music ADD. Like I'll play something once and then immediately change it like on the next turnaround.
Oh, wow.
You know, like I don't do it anymore, but when I was like younger, it'd be like I'd play something and be like, ooh, that was cool. And then by the time I try to repeat it, I'm like, no, it's changed. So that's how I started recording, was like recording myself and then friends and then bands and all that. And there's definitely those like little moments you can think back, like when you hear a song where you're like, oh yeah, that's why I want to do this. It's like, for me, one of the ones was Cold Desert, the Kings of Leon, one of the ones that Jakir did.
Yeah.
And like you hear the story on that where they're so fucked up they don't even remember that they recorded it. And like
that's crazy.
The vocals are like kind of in and out of time and out of tune, but he is basically ad-libbing past the first verse. He has nothing written. And you're just like, he gets to that line, the Jesus don't love me, nobody ever carried my load, was just like, when I heard that, I was like, bam, okay, well, I want to be around to make something like this and experience something like this in the moment, you know?
How awesome, man. How awesome that you come to town and start working for Jakir.
Oh, I know. That was such shithouse
Like, that's
luck.
amazing.
Yeah. I remember when I first got to town, you and Gabe were nice enough to take me to breakfast, and we sort of talked a little bit of like, I was like, man, I don't know what I'm going to do. Like, do I go talk to like studios? Do I go to intern? Do I go to school? Like what? And then I mentioned like, yeah, like, you know, I have Jakir's email. I don't know like what to do with it. And you're like, yeah, for sure, you should talk to him before you do anything.
Wow, I don't remember that at all. Well, I'm glad.
Yeah.
I'm glad you did.
Yeah. And I'm glad I did too. I'm glad I listened, because that worked out really great for me. I mean, I have some of the best experiences of my life so far because of that. So thanks for being kind. So you get to Nashville. What brought you to Nashville? Was it you were coming to write or coming to be an artist, or were you here for college? Or
yeah, school. I went to Belmont.
Is that where you met Gabe?
Where did I meet? Yeah. Well, I graduated before him. I'm trying to think if he was. I guess he was at school, but I met him through, he was in that band, Kopecki Family Band,
Yeah.
and I knew Kelsey, and I met Gabe through Kelsey.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, we've known each other forever. It's kind of weird it's like all the different lives people live throughout their one life. It's
Yeah.
like, oh shit, when I met you, I was a different person.
Yeah. I mean, you both were. You're both, you were here to be, sounded like more for being an artist, and then sort of pivoted to engineering and producing, and now like Gabe went sort of the other way. He's still an artist, but now he's producing, and
he's crushing it, man. His stuff sounds so good.
I
He
know.
was playing me a song he wrote the other day, and I was like, this isn't going to Brandon Flowers, but I think Brandon Flowers would murder somebody for this song.
Really?
Like, it's incredible. Yeah, I can't wait for it to come out.
Yeah,
It's crazy.
That guy's a wizard. He's so funny and just chaos, and I love it. He's all over the place, and it's great. Yeah, his stuff is always like, he'd send me stuff. I'm like, what? Why are you having me mix this? This is already like so cool, and like I'm just gonna spin my wheels for a week, and then we're gonna go back to like, he's hilarious that way. But so you graduate college, and then what? Are you engineering full time?
Well, I was working during college. I worked for a guy named Russ Long. I don't know if you know him.
I know the name. I don't think I've met him.
He's an engineer in town. He did that. I think the biggest thing he's done is that Sixpence record with "Kiss Me" on it.
I'm trying to think. I'm terrible with names.
It was a huge song in the 90s, like a gigantic song.
Oh, that song. It was in like movies and shit.
Yeah, like in every movie.
Yeah.
Once every 5 or 6 years, like it's back.
Yeah.
And becomes huge again.
For sure.
But I met him through Belmont and started working for him. And it's interesting, like your first question just about like how do you maintain a good what's it called, reputation around town. It's like I learned a lot of that from him, and he was always and is still one of just the kindest people I know, and very patient. I don't know if I've met an engineer who is more patient than him.
Really?
And yeah, I mean, I try really hard, and I'm like, I'm gonna hopefully like bust through the ticker tape and win that prize. But he's just a gracious person. It's like, and he'll, if he knows you and he loves you, you can take any of his gear you want, and like he's just kind of there for you. And I learned a lot about humanity just from watching him interact with artists and being like, okay, like everybody likes this guy. There's not anybody who doesn't.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's such a great thing to find early on in your career when you need a lot of grace.
Yeah,
that's important, because I mean, when I got here, I didn't know shit. You think you do, like you're like, oh yeah, I've done this, or I've made little records and stuff. Like I think I have a grasp of at least the basics, and then you're like, oh, no,
I don't know anything.
Yeah, no.
My favorite is when you feel like you know something, and you're doing good work. It does appear like you know something, and something switches in your head, and then you're like, wait a minute, I don't know anything, and then you don't like, and then you can't make music. Like something happens, and there's like, at least for me, it'll last like a month or two, and I'll be like, what was I doing? It's like this deliriousness sets in. And then I have to pick it up and find it again. It's like, it's a weird thing. It's like I lose that creative spirit or that flow or whatever.
Yeah, I that's so funny. Like I have the same thing where I'll like look back at like a mix template, or like open up an old mix that's not that old and be like, what the fuck was that? Like,
yeah,
I could have done this so much better. Or like, it's just the stage you're at then. You're like, oh yeah, what was I've gotten rid of all this stuff. Like I don't have any of these things anymore in my template or whatever. It's like, it's funny how those little cycles come and go, where you think you're doing good work, and then you're like, oh God, I don't know what the fuck I'm doing again.
Bro, I've done the reverse, where actually that happened to me recently. I'm mixing this record, and man, I did this record, I think it came out in 2013, but it's one that like people keep when they come to me, they reference, and it keeps coming up, is this record called with this artist Nightbeds,
Mm-hmm.
and the record's called Country Sleep.
Okay.
And this artist was referencing some tones and just the mixes in it, and so I went back. I was like, I wasn't nailing these mixes, and I went back and listened to the record, went back into the session, and be like, what was I doing? Like, I don't even remember.
Yeah.
And it was like, I mean, it's the reverse where it's so good, and I've stopped doing some of the things that I was doing that made it so good, and it's
Really?
like, oh, I forgot about that, and I'm not doing that as well
Yeah.
now. Like, I need to kind
like-
of step back into it.
What were some of the things that, like, can you think of anything offhand that you're like, why did I stop doing that? Like, this has made a big difference.
Man, one of the big things was the reverbs I was using.
Okay.
That was during the time when like everybody had those cracked plugins.
Yeah.
So you could have like literally any plugin you wanted, and I'm sure who knows what kind of like malware and viruses were on everybody's computer.
So many.
But the Lexicon native PCM, I don't know, their native reverb pack. Not a lot of people use them. I don't know anybody that uses them, but
Yeah.
for a time I was using those reverbs, and dude, like they are amazing.
Really?
Like, super amazing. And they have like a chamber, a vintage plate. I mean, I don't think they have a spring. I don't know. There's a room. There's a lot of different like plugins.
Yeah.
To the bundle, but man, it's just like the way it fills the space. Like it just feels amazing.
I have to look those up. I use the Lexicon, but the UA version, so it's like kind of neutered, but still sounds great. But
yeah,
that's so funny, man. That like how old are those mixes? You said 2013?
Yeah, 2012, 2013.
Wow.
So they're like 8 years ago.
Yeah. Wow. That's just funny, man. That just goes to show it's like you never quite have it all figured out. Even when you think you do, you're like, wait, I got to go back to this. This was actually helping. Or it's funny because I think I was listening to a Pure Mix thing with Andrew Sheps was talking to Jakir, and like Andrew's now, he doesn't even have like a compressor on his 2-bus anymore.
Whoa, cool.
And I was like, what? Like, you're the guy that's got a compressor there, and then his whole back bus thing that he does where he's sending the whole mix to another compressor and then blending that in, and then it's like,
whoa,
now you're not doing any of that, huh? And he's like, yeah, my mixes are way better. Like,
crazy.
yeah, it's just it's so funny to me that no matter, we always get like so bogged down in gear, but it's always the magician, not the wand, right? It's like,
sure, it's
the person in their ears and their tendencies, and that's what makes their sound. Like Jakir is such a good example of that. Whereas like, when we would like co-mix stuff, it's like I have much more of like, I would say maybe a modern approach and a little more heavy-handed on things. And if I'd start a mix and then get it going, and it's like having it feel what felt good to me, and then he would spend maybe an hour or two and be like, hey, will you come listen? And it's like, well, this is a Jakir mix already. Like,
wow.
And it's not that drastic of a difference. It's just the way he hears things and balances things is always just, I would describe his mixes or his mix process as like death by 1,000 paper cuts. It's just a bunch of little tweaks across everything that add up to this thing that just kills. So it's interesting. I don't know. I'm fascinated by this stuff.
Is he changing, like in those scenarios? Is it like, is he changing the processing happening to each track and the overall buses and all that stuff, or is it more like volume blend?
A little bit of both.
Or is it kind of a little both?
Yeah. And it's not drastic. Like he may change an EQ point, just like, oh, I'm going to shift it a little lower, and then that's it. I know, or a little higher. Like he might just change the EQ point or change how much it's boosting, usually by less, and then a little bit of like volume. But it's just little touches all over that are like, oh wow, I wouldn't have gotten there.
Wow.
Yeah. That stuff's always so fascinating to me. But so getting back to the studio for you, When does the brown ale come into your life?
Man, shortly after that, and R.I.P. Man, they're shutting the doors
Oh
in
no.
March.
Are they?
Mm-hmm.
Bummer.
Which like everything's changed so much. I think it's a good call. It's
Yeah.
but man, I don't remember. I think that was 2010.
Mm.
But I had like everybody had a little bedroom rig that was in my upstairs in my house. It's where I did a bunch of mixing
Mm-hmm.
and some recording, and then my friends who I had met actually through Russ, a guy named Chris Kimmerer and another guy, Mark Sibilia, they were living together and they had a studio in the basement of the house they were renting.
Yeah.
Except there was like no wiring, no anything. And so they had gotten my number and I was like, well, I'll wire it up for you. No problem. Do some drumming for me.
Yeah.
And so I went over there and at the time it was a really cool space. Now, like I wouldn't work in there at all because it sounded horrible. But I was like, hey, what if I move some gear over here and like we shared this space? I could get out of my house.
Yeah.
At least tracking. And so we did that, and it was, man, when we were all working together, we all got way busier, which, speaks to the fruits of collaboration.
Yes.
But, so that went on and was going great for a few months. And then the landlord was like, hey, I'm selling the house, so you guys got to get out.
Oh.
And it was like, we had a couple records lined up and we were like, oh man, we're just getting our feet wet. Like, what are we going to do? And I think at the time, we were probably 24, 25.
Wow.
And like didn't have a ton of money to find another spot. And at that time, Berry Hill was nothing. Like no studios were over there. I mean, Blackbird was over there. House of Blues was over there. And I think the old Sputnik was over there.
Yeah.
And I think
in the House of Blues, right? Is that where?
I just honestly, yes. Yeah. But not a whole lot of other spaces. And so we went and looked and found this like shitty house for, I think it was like $1,000 a month.
Holy shit. Yeah.
Which is great.
Yeah.
Now it would be great. And, but so yeah, man, we were just like, well, okay, we have this place, we could do this. Or if it's too much of a stretch, we can go, back to our bedrooms essentially.
Right.
And like, man, that just didn't sound like very much fun. Like we were having so much fun.
Yeah.
Working together, collaborating. I was like, let's go for it. Let's do it. Or one of us was like that, or we all were like that. So, man, it was a real stretch financially to make it work for us. Like we weren't all working all the time, and what we were working on was like barely making any money. And like people don't really think about it, but back then it's like they hadn't really figured out streaming. People were still stealing music.
Right.
And like the bottom of the music industry had just like a few years back completely fallen out.
Right.
So it was like, man, it was hard to get any sort of budgets that were
anything, yeah,
usable. So it was like, but we did it, and Mark ended up having to live in one of the bedrooms of the studio, and like, man, it was kind of a real shit show for probably about a year. But it was one of the first, I mean, I guess I don't know this for sure, but it felt like it was one of the first studios that felt really kind of like producer / artist friendly, as far as like, there's not a huge learning curve of a console. There's not like, it's just all outboard gear. Like you would find that anybody knows how to operate.
Yeah.
And then a rig, a Pro Tools rig. And for the time that was different. And, it was, I think we charged like at first $250 to $350 a day.
That's yeah, that's good.
It's just like nothing.
Yeah, that's nothing.
So it's like the price is right for all the people like us who have no money.
Right.
And man, for the time, it was just a really like, and the room was cool. Like the drums in the room sounded pretty cool. Although it's funny, I did get a call or a text or a call from Reed one time, and he was like, "Hey man, people are talking about how shitty your room sounds. You might want to fix it, or you're gonna have a bad reputation." I was like, I remember this sense of panic, just like, oh fuck, Reed Shippen is very kindly telling me how shitty
Yeah.
my stuff sounds. You know,
Yeah.
it's a different way of caring, but I saw the care in it.
Yeah.
But at the same time, man, it was so petrifying. I was just like,
Oh,
like,
your stomach drops, cold sweat immediately. Like, oh no.
yeah, we're gonna fail. This is gonna fail. Like, you know, still being afraid of failure, and
Yeah.
but it didn't fail, and it kept going, and it a lot of records I love were made there, and super proud of it.
Yeah. That's awesome. Good on Reed. I mean, that's not an easy phone call to make to somebody, but
No,
to make it like to make it in the spirit of not twisting the knife, but to like, hey man, I want you to succeed. So if you're gonna do that, you need to fix this because people are talking. You know, that's
yeah.
that speaks a lot to Reed, and I've got a lot of good things to say about Reed. Reed's just a fucking solid dude. That's so cool. It sounds like you guys are ahead of the curve, honestly. Like with it being so producer and like artist friendly compared to like, you know, everything else in Berry Hill at the time is like this big commercial space with a giant console, and you got to have an assistant to get you going because it's so complex for most people. And now
I remember. Sorry, I remember Vance Powell walking in. So at some point I asked Russ, my old the engineer I used to assist for. I was like, hey man, you want to be involved at the Owl? Like, you're not using a lot of your tracking gear. We'll cut you in, and it will require nothing of you. And he was like, yeah, let's do it. So, you know, that having him in there brought other eyes, like bigger eyes, to what was going on at the scene.
Sure.
And I remember Vance walking in, and he was like, he just laughed. And he was like, you don't have a console? Like, what are you guys doing? You can't have a studio without a console.
Yeah.
And we were like, well, it's kind of like this hybrid thing. It's like, it's something other people I think will want.
Yeah.
And he just kind of laughed at it and was
It's
like,
never gonna work. Yeah.
Which I get it, man. Like, listen, I've got a Rupert Neve 5088
Yeah.
in my place now, and it's fucking awesome. Like, I get the console vibes. He's not wrong. But I mean, you know, at the time, like you said, it's like people get intimidated by that shit. And like, it definitely, there is benefits to having a console, and I love working on them. I would prefer to, but like some people are just like, I don't want to do that because I don't understand it. And
it's a barrier to your creativity if you don't have the chops to run one.
Yeah.
And like from an engineering standpoint, somebody that's got their 10,000 hours like you, where you're like, well, yeah, this is just an extension of the rest of, you know, this helps me get where I'm going. It makes sense. And especially for somebody like Vance Powell, who's, you know, a fucking assassin on everything he touches. Like that makes sense. Sure, you wouldn't want Vance Powell to make a record without a console, but you know, for the most people that you're probably were marketing to that were coming in to, you know, do a write or a demo or do an EP for, you know, pretty cheap, that's the best case is like, okay, you know, we've got good gear that anybody can figure out, and you don't have to have this giant learning curve. So that's hilarious. So I could totally see Vance coming in and just, okay. Yeah. No console, huh? Yeah. Well, a quick story. Reed Shippen is awesome because I shouldn't have, but I entered in on this Pure Mix competition because when I did work with Pure Mix, they gave us a free subscription. So I had like a bunch of downtime after this gig. I had like a month, and I was just running through all their like mix stuff just to have like source material to mix. And I entered in on the Reed Shippen contest just because I was like, well, I just did it, so I'll put it in. I ended up winning, which
amazing
was great. I mean, I got Sonar Works out of it. It really helped. I did feel guilty. It was like, well, I've done some work for Pure Mix. That kind of felt like nepotism or whatever. But Mark from Pure Mix like texted me. He's like, hey man, Reed wants your number. Can I give him your number? I was like, oh yeah. So Reed and I go back and forth, and he's like, yeah, I had some comments on your mix, just so like it was really good, but I have some notes for you. I was like, great, let's get together, like let's have coffee or drinks or something. And it took a while because he's a busy guy, but we got together and we had some drinks I forget, some bar in Green Hills. And the first thing, he introduces himself, and the first thing he says is like, "What can I do for you?"
Cool.
And I'm like, man, I don't want anything from you. I just like, I want to get to know you, and like, I'm a fan of your work, and like, I don't want anything from you. I just want to know you. And he was like, "Okay, cool. I just like to like on these types of things, like, how can I help you?" It's like, that's rare,
Yeah.
especially, for somebody you don't really know. And then we concluded that, we had like a drink or two, and he's like, "Well, what do you need? Do you need any gear? Like anything you want to test out?" And I was like, "Oh man, I've been like lusting after a 2 Bus Plus I was looking at." And he's like, "Well, I got one I'm not using. Come to the studio. I'll let you use it." I'm like, okay. And we drove over. He had already lent it out to somebody else. He forgot about it. But just just the fact that he was cool enough to like take some dude that he just met and be like, "Hey man, I trust you enough to borrow this piece of gear," says a lot about Reed. So Reed, you're awesome. Real quick. So we've gotten through the brownout. When do you build the space that you're in now with your badass? I know you just got your Rupert Neve, but when do you move to the space you're at now? Is this at your house?
It is. Yeah, I think it was 2000. I think we moved in 2008 to the Owl because we were there a few years, and then 2013. Yeah, it's at my house.
Okay.
I think it was finished in 2013 or 2014. It's hard to remember.
Yeah. What drove you to move everything back home?
Well, so the Owl had a side bedroom, and Mark had moved out, and I moved a mixing room in there so that I could be mixing even if the Owl was booked for tracking. And like, man, it's a 1950s military house. Like the walls are barely walls.
Right.
And I did my best, but man, sound control is difficult. Like
yeah. I'm going through that right now.
It's expensive, and you kind of need to have it from the ground up if you want it to be good. And it's I was always walking out and being like, "Hey, I'll turn down if you do." And it was like, these are paying clients.
Yeah.
Like, it's kind of, they were nice, but they could have just as easily been like, "Well, yeah, fuck you. We're paying your day rate.
Right.
And we're having to listen to you mix."
Right.
And like, the studio, like my studio partners were great. Like, we never really fought about anything or argued. It's just like, what do we need to do? Okay, let's do it. It was really like just the best scenario for a partnership. Like, we wanted each other to succeed. And in that, I saw that me having that space next door was like the antithesis of allowing both of us to succeed. It's like I couldn't succeed, and nor could the studio.
Right.
So it's like I need to find a different situation. And so the original intention was just for me to build a space to mix and do some pre-production and production, and then use the Owl for everything else. And I would keep my gear over there.
Right.
And man, I got the space built, and there's something about just being able to walk 20 feet back and get in the studio and go. That was like, I think I need to completely exit the Owl so I can just have all my stuff.
Yeah.
So that was like a couple years into having my space, and it's like you do miss the community. There's something about seeing people every day and just kind of like having that camaraderie that doesn't exist when you don't have a shared space.
Yeah. Yeah, I get it. I'm in the same now. I went from like, being at Jakir's place all the time with Jakir and, our assistant Danny and our intern, and then like, everybody, you get there early, kind of shooting the shit, hanging out, and then kind of the same thing. And then now I'm like back to this place where it's just me,
What made you guys move?
It was kind of a lot of things. Number one, like, we had kind of we'd been toying around with the idea of like moving back within like 5 years, just sort of seeing where things went in Nashville, career wise for me. But we're kind of on an island out in Nashville. We don't have any family out there. We have some family friends that would see every once in a while, but I was working so much that you don't see anybody other than the people you work with. So
Yeah.
we were kind of on an island, and we're thinking of having kids and doing that whole thing, and kind of like, well, if we're gonna have kids, it's like it's so helpful to have that community of family where you can lean on each other, and especially with the kind of careers I have. My wife is like in interior design, and has been doing a lot of like home organizing for people. So it's a lot of just, it's sporadic. And we'd always kind of thought like within 5 years, maybe we'll move back and I'll try to, do something in Phoenix, because the studio level here is just not even close to Nashville. I mean, not many places are, right? But
Yeah, of course.
so it's kind of all that compounded with the pandemic and the lockdown. And like right when Nashville got locked down, my wife was at the park with the dog and fell and broke her collarbone.
Whoa.
Yeah. So then we had to, go to the hospital. And then she had to have surgery like 2 days later. We were stuck indoors for like a month during her recovery, and all this. It's just all this compounding like stuff. And I think she was really just feeling the isolation, like on top of the normal isolation. And she just one day at lunch was like, "Man, I think I want to move back." I was like, "Okay, let's see what it takes," because we had a house in Franklin, a townhouse in Franklin, and like the year prior, if we looked at our like Zillow Zestimate, we were upside down, and I was like, well, we might be here for a bit, And then I called our realtor, and he's like, "Oh no, you guys, it's so hot right now still." I was like, "Really?" So we looked, and like we appraised for well over what we, bought in at, and it would have allowed us to get out of some debt. So we're like, okay,
Amazing.
well, let's just see what it's going to take to list it, because this was right when they were saying that like the sky is falling and like the economy is going to crash and we're all going to be in a depression. So I was like, well, who's going to buy a house in a pandemic? We might as well list, and it might take us 6 months. It might take us a month. Who knows? And we sold in 3 days.
Dude, that's insane.
Yeah. And it was a
That is insane.
Cash offer, over asking, and a 30-day close. So we went from like, maybe we'll move, to shit, we have to have all of our stuff out of the house and across the country in 30 days.
Wow.
Yeah. So that was a long-winded way of, that's why we moved back. To be closer to family, to sort of just see where this next stage takes us. And to be perfectly frank, everything with Jakir was kind of coming to like its own natural conclusion. Like, we're still super close. I talk to him like almost every day. And I still, do work for him here and there, but the way he's making records and the way he's sort of crafting his career is just not like conducive to having the team that he had anymore. And I was sort of doing a lot more on my own anyways, so it was a natural time to separate. And everyone thought I was his nephew anyways, so I was like, well.
Man, it's really funny how life tends to just like, if you kind of surrender to what either what your desires are or what life is asking of you, it kind of like closes and opens all the doors simultaneously to just kind of shepherd you into new places.
Yeah, man. And it's wild. That's just been my motto, is just I'm kind of going with it. I'm not necessarily going with the flow and like living on momentum, because that can lead you to some bad spots too. But just kind of, when a door opens, like, let's consider it and then jump. Like, that's how I found this place, was another case of just like random luck, where I went to the barber out here. I found some barber shop, went to it, and it's like run by metalheads, like all touring musicians they're not working, and they're all got really good at cutting hair on the road. Now they have a barbershop.
That's crazy.
And I made friends with the guys, and this guy like hit me up like a couple weeks later and was like, "Hey, I need to do a guest spot for some vocals. Can you do it?" I was like, absolutely. I just said yes because I didn't have a spot to record. I was working on headphones in like my brother-in-law's like spare room, right? But my buddy has a studio here in Sunny Slope, and I text him. I was like, "Hey, can I use your spot for like a couple hours on Sunday?" And he's like, "No." He's like, "No, that's my day off. I need to rest. But somebody just moved out of the apartment in the back. We could set you up in there for the day if you need." And I was like, "Okay, cool." So I went and checked it out. I was like, "Well, this is pretty cool. Like, what do you got to get for this?" And they're like, it's $600 a month to be here, and it's super close to the house, and I've got a little room to mix and a tiny room to do drums, but they seem to work and sound good. But it was just this thing of like, I met a dude at a barbershop, and now I'm in a studio. It was like, it's just those, we just go with it and see what happens kind of thing. It's wild.
Yeah, that's how it works, man. And just being open and not knowing where it's going to lead you, and trying to make good decisions along the way.
Yeah.
It's incredible.
That this sort of you moving the studio at home, I'm curious, because you're married and you have kids. You have
5-year-old,
5-year-old, one kid. How do you balance having being a father and being a husband in an industry that frankly doesn't really reward people that have personal lives?
Sometimes poorly.
Okay. That's a very honest answer.
Yeah, sometimes really well. It just kind of like sometimes life is in balance and sometimes it's not.
Mm-hmm.
And I think in my head, I have to allow space for the imbalances. And just it's my personality type, man. And my son is the same way. Like I obsess and I pour myself completely into something, and I get lost, and I have to get lost. That's like part of the creative endeavor.
Right.
And so I will do that, and then usually I'm pretty good about recognizing the fact that like, oh man, like I'm not I'm not allowing enough space for my family.
Mm-hmm.
And I kind of pull back and I do that. I something I do try to do really in every interaction is be very intentional and just be present.
Mm-hmm.
And who said, there's a quote that says something like, the greatest gift that you can give someone is your attention.
Mm-hmm.
And it's completely true. And so often when we interact with people, and man, even when I'm with my family, sometimes it's like our attention gets split.
Yeah.
And that's when people grow resentful, and that's when people don't feel seen, and that's when conflict can arise. But it's like, if I find that with myself, even if I only have 2 hours a day to give to my son and to my family, the times when I do that and I am attentive and present, like that goes so much further than a full day of me on my phone,
Right?
But or whatever, worrying about a project or like anything. And so it's like it really comes down to the idea of focused attention.
Yeah.
And what is the intent of this interaction?
Okay.
And like for me, especially with my son, it's like I want him to know that I love him deeply and that I see him and that he is obviously there's some needing to train him how to be a human.
Right.
And in that, like there's correction, but also let him know like, hey man, you're great how you are. And which is hard to do to a 5-year-old.
Right.
Or for a 5-year-old, but I mean, it's an important part of development. And so it's like, sometimes things get out of balance, and we just have to as a family, we have had to grow to be okay with that.
Mm-hmm.
But also, be receptive. And when my wife tells me, it's like, hey, like, you're not spending enough time around here, me being like, okay, I'm sorry. Um, I'll let me move some stuff so that I can be present.
Yeah.
Because I think when someone calls you out, whether it be like on a mix or it be in your life or whatever, it's like there's a natural tendency to move into the spirit of defensiveness.
Mm-hmm. Back foot
And
immediately. Yeah.
yeah, and it's like, man, there's just no need. People are just telling you what they need.
Yeah.
And you can, sometimes if Rachel's my wife,
Mm-hmm.
if she's like, hey, like you haven't been present, well, it's, sometimes it's like, well, I'm right in the middle of this big record, and like I have to get to the other side of it,
Right.
because we need to eat.
Yeah.
And so there's like that side of it too, to where it's like we're just constantly weighing the needs of everybody and trying to make the best decisions based off that. But it is hard. You're right. It's like I did a record in September with this band, and we rented a farmhouse down in Columbia, Tennessee,
Oh, hell
and I
yeah.
moved my whole studio down there, and we lived there. And so it's like, well, shit, I'm not going to see my family for 3 weeks. That's just,
Yeah.
or a month. Like, that's going to be what that is.
Wow.
So, man, a lot of props to families of people in the music business, because it is hard.
It is.
It's really hard, and it's hard to stay. It's hard to stay in that path of grace and love.
Yeah.
You
You
know?
feel like eventually the grace might run out, at least for like my wife
Yeah.
has been a saint as far as putting up with the kind of psychoticness that goes along with being in the music industry, or I'm already a very emotional person, and can be moody, and she unfortunately gets to deal with like the worst and best parts of me, because when you get to work, you got to be a professional, right?
Yeah.
There's
Totally.
Whatever the hell is going on, I'm here, I'm ready to go, we're going to get this done, and then it's going to be the best it can be. But then when you get home and you're pissed off because you don't have any, like, you're getting home at 11 o'clock every night or midnight at night, and it's like you don't have any time to eat or like decompress, and then they ask a simple question, and I'm like, wow, you get spun out, and it's like it's a tough thing. And I love your answer of not well sometimes. That's an important thing for people to understand, is it doesn't, like, this is hard fucking work, like, to make it work. Like, you have to put in the time and communicate. I think that's a really important thing that you touched on, is like, when your wife says, hey, you're not here right now, you're not present, and then you being able to say like, well, look, I'm in the middle of a big project, and I can't be right now. Like, the only way for me to really truly be present is to get through this and then reassess. That's an important thing that I think people need to know, is this is like, it's tough. It's always a balancing act. And that's one of the things I really love and respect about Jakir that he's done in the last, I'd say, 5 years. When I first started working with him, I worked every single day for like 2 years. Like,
Wow.
I was working at Home Depot and Starbucks when I wasn't working with him, but it was like we were doing 6 days a week for like a year, because he had so many projects and was so hot. And at the end of that like 2-year stretch where we were just hammered down, he just went like, look, I'm not going to do this anymore. I've only got a certain amount of years with my son in the house still before he leaves, and I want to make time to be around. So he's like, Monday through Friday, I'm leaving at 6 or 7, and if we need to, I'll go later, but let's be efficient with the time that we have here today. Let's not fuck around. And he made that choice and stuck to it, and it made a big difference in his life. I always respect that for him.
I think that's a beautiful way of being, and it's just like, it, it goes back to what we started this whole conversation with. It's like music is a delivery mechanism of an emotion. And
Mm,
if you do not foster a healthy life and a healthy lifestyle, everything is going to be worse.
right.
Everything is going to suffer.
Yeah.
So it's like, and man, this is, I don't know if you knew me back then, but like, you know, I've been on a sort of both mental health, spiritual health, physical health journey for the past 7 years
Mm-hmm.
or so. And it's like, man, like when I worked at the Owl and like I was like suppressing some emotional truths about myself, drinking every day,
Mm-hmm.
um, like eating super poorly, not exercising. Like, man, it's just depression will sit on you, especially when you're not moving all day.
Right.
And it's like, well, then you're not like if your life is a tapestry of art, you're not creating the best art you can because in your body you feel like shit.
Yeah.
And so it's like put in the time to spend with your community, to spend with your family, to spend with yourself,
Yes.
to uh wrestle with the demons that you need to wrestle with, to think clearly.
Yes.
um and for everybody that looks different, but it's the world would be such a better place if we all realized that before we can really like fully express ourselves,
Mm-hmm.
we need to come to a place of understanding and love within ourselves.
Right.
And everything else can come out of that. And that shit takes work. It's not automatic. It's not
And it's ugly work too. It's not pleasant,
yeah.
you know.
Yeah. It
That's
certainly can be.
that's a really important thing that I actually I really wanted to touch on in this conversation was the importance of a community outside of what you do for a profession. I think
Hmm.
is important to
Yeah.
separate the two, whether it's
Yeah.
a fitness community or like whatever your hobby is. Like for me personally, like I'm was on a similar trajectory that you just alluded to, whereas like I was eating like shit, sleeping like shit, like stressed out all the time, like just grinding my teeth away when I sleep, like just run out. Like like resting heart rate was like 100. It's like terrible,
Woo!
like just terrible. And as soon as I started taking care of myself, like I started a boxing class, just anything to like, hey, this looks interesting and also has the fun byproduct of getting in shape. Like as soon as you start taking care of yourself, the rest gets better. Like you perform better at work, you're less stressed out. You're clearer mentally. That like you said, if you're trying to be a conduit and help art and creativity, it's really difficult to do that when you're full of mud and
Yeah.
your insides feel dark. Like when you're, well fed, well slept, and more fit, you just feel lighter and more vibrant, I guess, is for the lack of a better
Vibrant's a
word.
good word.
But I think it's important, and you touching on that, I think, is important to mention as well. Like, what do you do? Do you do anything outside of music that is like your release or your like part of your spiritual and physical journey you've been on? Like what?
Man, I've done, yeah, God damn, I've done a lot of work. And I'm constantly finding new things. I had my wife told me she was pregnant at the end of 2014, and um, right before then, me and Gabe had a huge. Gabe is just my best friend in the world, and we had a huge falling out.
Oh, okay.
And um, man, she told me she was pregnant, and I just remember this feeling of dread and this like, I wanted to have a kid,
Mm-hmm.
but this voice came to me and said, "Conrad, this child will not be who you tell them to be. He will be who you are."
Mm.
And then it asked me the question, it's like, "What are you?" And I was like, the answer was readily available. I was like, "I am horribly unhappy."
Yeah.
And that responsibility falls on nobody. Like, there was no victimization, there was
Yeah.
no judgment, there was no, like, there was just no blame to go around except for how I had sculpted my life into
Yeah.
what it was. And I was like, I got some serious work to do to be a to use your word, a vibrant human being. And it for me, that whole journey kind of started with uh like the building blocks. Like, what am I putting in my body?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, well, this is horrible. I need to change this.
Yeah.
And like go into like steamed vegetables and rice for a year, and bone broth. And
Yeah.
okay, am I breathing well? Okay, I'm gonna learn how to breathe, doing the Wim Hof stuff,
So
and the
important.
cold plunges, getting super deep into psychedelics and allowing them to
Okay.
completely alter the perception and the way that I viewed my life, because
Yeah.
I needed it. I needed it badly.
Yeah.
I got, I was 300 pounds when I decided to make this shift.
Wow.
And,
I don't think I knew
so
that.
it's like I couldn't really just jump right back into working out.
Right.
And when I did, like, I would pull my shoulder, or like something would go wrong with my body. So it was like, I'm going to start, I've got to start at it's like Neo getting out of the Matrix. I've got to start at the base level.
Yeah.
Because I can't even, like, I don't have the body, the physical ability to do anything.
Right.
So, I mean, I started doing just a little yoga app on my phone, and I got way into it. And then, like, a few years ago, started going to Hot Yoga East Nashville,
Mm-hmm.
and built a community there. There's just wonderful teachers there, wonderful people that go. And man, I got a little crazy. I got a little obsessed, and less so now because of the pandemic, but
Yeah.
like, where I just went almost every day for 2 years. And yeah, it's like treating my health and my mental health and my spiritual health like I do music.
Yeah.
And that is that there's always something new to be discovered and created.
Yeah.
And let me find what that new thing is. And so it's a really interesting topic to me, and it's a really interesting place to explore and to talk to other people and see what they're doing. Because really, like, you're only limited by your imagination in this,
Mm-hmm.
and by what you're willing to do for yourself.
Right. And it's remarkable how little people are willing to do for themselves, like, on average.
I just don't think they know what they're missing.
Right. That's
Like, my first psychedelic experience was with mushrooms, and I didn't take very much,
mm-hmm.
but I took enough to where it was like, the colors sort of shifted and everything became really bright and beautiful. And I remember, like, in my mind, it was like when you're like in a airplane driving through it or flying through a thunderstorm,
Mm-hmm.
and like there's lightning all around and it's dark and you can't see shit, and then like you're taking off and you get above the clouds and it's just sunshine and it's peaceful and it's perfect. It's like I had this vision of me just like being a giant and sitting, and my head was in the clouds, and there's lightning and there's confusion and I can't see shit, and it's just like utterly disorienting.
Yeah.
And then a voice came and was like, Konrad, just stand up. And I stand up and my head goes above the clouds, and it's heaven.
Yeah.
I mean, there's just golden light beaming over the clouds, and it's kind of sunset, and it's like this feeling of peace just falls over me.
Yeah.
And it's like, man, I needed that experience. I needed that experience to know what the other side could be.
Yeah.
I came down off the mushrooms and like kind of went back into the clouds a little bit.
Sure.
But the memory of the golden light of the sun was firmly fixed in my mind. It's like, oh, like I can work towards feeling this way all the time.
Right. I can get there.
And, yeah. And I just, man, I don't know that people know that they can get there.
That's true. I think it, a lot of people get their identities really wrapped up in their careers. And that, I think, is one of the most dangerous things you can do for your happiness, because guess what? When your career's not going well, life's not going well. Like,
Sure.
if you're not doing good at work, you're not doing good at home either. and it's got this sort of ugly feedback loop that can happen. Whereas, like you said, where if you work on yourself and you work on at home and you're happy regardless of what's going on, like in your career or in how successful you are, then you have the clarity to help make those things happen. You know what I'm trying to say?
Yeah.
And I think that was, that was a big revelation when I was, in the throes of like being a shitty assistant or thinking that, I'm going to get fired or these people are doing better than me or whatever. And it's just like, I'm not this project. Like, I'm not this
fear.
Exactly.
Fear.
Yeah. And it's just like nonstop. I told my buddy this the other day, like when I was in the middle of that, granted I wasn't taking care of myself. I was working every single day and, woefully underqualified for the job. So thinking I'm going to get found out at any moment too is like this fear. I had this sense of like, if I just stopped and thought about it, I could feel the earth spinning, like, and it was going to throw me off if I thought about it too long. And it's important to take those steps and like, okay, this is not healthy. This is me. I need to get myself under control and kind of take the right steps to get myself healthy. And then
what are your steps?
Well, for me, it was, I had to just stop. I take everything really personally I take everything really seriously. Like if I screw up a patch, like I'm thinking about it all day. Like it's just this negativity thing, and
you get the feedback loop.
Yeah. I would just get into these feedback loops and just taking a step. Meditation was huge, and like doing a guided, like I would do a guided 10-minute meditation every day before I go to work. And like, just take these steps of like, why am I having a borderline panic attack before the session? I was like, oh, I'm having this because I'm freaked out about not doing a good job. Like, okay, well, wanting to do a good job is a good thing. This is a positive. Like you care. So you just sort of break these things down. I'd have to break things down into these little steps. And then, for me, I found boxing, and from there I found Muay Thai, which like offered me a community and also just some confidence outside of that to where I felt good, and feeling good and, dressing the part. Like for me, I look like I'm 10. So if I don't dress normal, or if I don't like kind of dress up and take the way I look more serious, everyone just thinks I'm the intern or, like shouldn't be in the room when they're having the conversations.
That's a horrible feeling.
Yeah. And
that's a horrible feeling.
It is. And it took me a while to be like, what? I'm like, oh yeah, I look like I'm 10 and I'm dressed like shit. Like I don't take myself seriously because I take what I do seriously, but not myself, if that makes sense. So I would, start dressing the part a little bit more. And when you look good, or when you think you look good, you feel better. So it's just, for me, it just took a lot of steps of like getting the fear under control and then just feeling more confident. And once you start that path, it can have a positive feedback loop of like, you just get these positive things reinforced of like, oh, I'm more relaxed. I'm doing my job better. Now I don't need to freak out as much. Oh no, I've done this a million times. I can do this. And then you just go from there.
I think that's the idea of karma. I think we kind of like mistake what it's like. Oh, if you do a shitty thing to somebody, it's going to come back and get you. It's like, well, no, it's like, what about the momentum of which you are orienting your life? And it's just like, if you do something good for yourself and then do another thing and another thing, it's just the cascading effects of all of those things.
Yes.
It's just going to propel you into a better place.
Yes. That's 100%. And that's actually another thing. I put a post about this on Instagram the other day. Is one of the things where I would get into these negative mindsets or like, why don't I have gigs? Like I can't get these, I missed this mix thing, or like I would just start to spiral and I'd get out of my head by going and helping somebody else. Like,
wow.
I mentioned Muay Thai, like the Muay Thai gym I went to, I was there for like, I would save up because I didn't have enough to be like a member. So I would go for like, I'd save up and go for like a private so I could like get some more work in, right? And he mentioned like, oh, we're moving gyms next week. I'm like, oh, I got a truck. Do you need help? You know, and then
Amazing.
yeah, that'd be great. Help them move the gym, and then now you've made a relationship, and he's like, well, why don't you just come train with us for a little while? Like, I'm not worried about the money for the moment. Just come train, and then, you know, having an artist friend that's like, oh, you know, I need these mixes done, but I don't have the money. And I'm like, well, send it over. I got nothing going on. Let's just get it done. You know, and those things always lead to more. Just to more.
Yep.
And that was one of the like the big light bulb moments was like, oh yeah, if I'm just gracious with whatever I can offer to somebody, it always comes back around. So
That's beautiful. And even if it's like, if it's not in a tangible way, it comes back around immediately emotionally,
oh yeah.
which is like huge.
Yeah.
Huge.
It almost doesn't feel right because you're like, oh, now I feel good and I did like, yeah.
It's like, hey man, if you feel like shit, well, do something that feels good.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
the easiest thing. We never think about it.
No, you don't. So you mentioned your psychedelics experimentation, and then you've recently launched a I guess it's a solo project, right? That you're sort of delving into your, if I'm not mistaken, you're sort of delving into the like your journey with psychedelics in this music, right? Or
yeah, I mean,
something.
psychedelics have a small. They have like, it's basically like the lessons that I've been taught.
Yeah. So tell me
through psychedelics.
Tell me about this project, how it came about.
Man, my wife and I have had a pretty like rough, a pretty trying couple years, and you know, really have experienced, well, a lot of healing, but also a lot of pain, and I found myself. I've always written music, but I was alone in the house. They had gone up to Kansas City to visit family, and I had a project, so I couldn't go. I was just feeling like just really kind of really vulnerable and really kind of man, I'm not finding the words, but um I was unable to get myself out of a shitty perspective of
Mm-hmm.
how I was viewing our relationship, how I was viewing my life. And I just kind of instinctually picked up a guitar, and man, I was lucky I hit record because I just played the song and the words came to me, and it felt, you know, it was one of those moments that felt external, as though I was being sung to.
Yeah.
And it, that kind of kicked it off of just like sitting down with the guitar and allowing, I mean, I don't really allowing my spirit to speak truth to my situations and to other situations.
Yeah.
And by truth, I just mean the fact that everything is love, and love is the only lens to look through any situation. And that, like, whether it be the feeling of betrayal or the fear of death or the idea of getting older, you know, it's all wrapped in this veneer of love, and that's a real perspective to inhabit. And that we don't that, well, me personally, but I think us as a greater culture sort of just view life in the incorrect way, and it keeps us isolated, and it keeps us from experiencing the fullness and the depth of what life could offer.
Yeah.
And it just, man, that's where it was sort of out of a need for catharsis is where the songs just started to come in. And my friend Andrew Herringer, he was in this band Milo Green. I don't know if you've heard of them, but you know, he really connected with one of the songs, and so last year I went to LA and we recorded a handful of them, and I mean, just so many people being very encouraging for me to do it. So I just like started doing it.
Yeah.
And yeah, I'm kind of like slowly putting that stuff out.
That's awesome. Are you gonna put out like a full length or?
I have a full length. I'm gonna do a single in March.
Mm-hmm.
I think March. I don't know when. Sometime in March, middle March.
Okay.
And just do some singles, kind of for a few months, and then do an EP, and then I've got a second EP together that I'll probably bundle as a full length.
That's awesome.
But also releasing meditations and just like, some of my writings as I sit and reflect.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That's great. And what's the project called?
It's called Soul. It's my middle name, SOLL.
Wow, that's cool. Soul.
Yeah. It's kind of interesting, man. It's like this journey. So Konrad, my name means wise counselor in German, but then my middle name means man of peace. And it's funny because it's like this whole 7-year process has been me arriving in my life to a perspective of peace and like an end to the suffering in which I was just allowing my space, myself to be in.
Wow.
Which is kind of weird, man. It's kind of funny.
It is crazy. It's like it took that long to sort of embody your own name, your own self, which is, wow, that kind of hurts my brain. I want to move into a couple rapid fire questions just to sort of round this out. Nothing too drastic here, but best bad action movie from the 80s or 90s, or your favorite rather, if you have one.
I mean, my favorite. I don't think it's bad. I think it's classic. I love Alien.
Oh yeah, that's so good.
It's so good.
It's so good.
Also, any Arnold Schwarzenegger movie. I mean, I love Arnold.
Yeah, we're of that. How old are you? You're early 30s.
36.
30. Yeah, I mean, we're in that prime Arnold generation. I mean, everything he did was just golden. Most overrated piece of gear.
Most overrated? Oh man. Shit. I don't know, because as things are popping up in my head, I'm like, well, that's actually pretty good.
Yeah,
that's actually pretty good. Fuck. I don't know. I don't know. I can't. I don't think I can answer that.
That's fair. That's an answer. I like it. The man that can find a use for anything. I like it. Dream car.
Dream car. I love my Tacoma, but probably I mean Tesla Model X or the Cybertruck. I mean,
yeah. Those are so sick.
It'd be pretty awesome.
Yeah. I think I would. Yeah. The Model X is awesome too. I mean, I was listening to the most recent like Elon interview where he's talking about he calls that like the Fabergé egg of cars, and the amount of shit that they put in that car is like just mind blowing. What's your favorite meal?
Cheat day meal, pizza.
Pizza.
I mean, pizza's amazing. Folk from Folk. Have you been to Folk?
No.
Here in town?
Where's that?
Woo! You know where Rolf and Daughters?
Yeah.
It's like an Italian place. So they have like a sister restaurant that basically like specializes in these sourdough crust pizzas. It's like, it's pretty bougie, but it's really good.
Damn.
Otherwise, man, I just keep it simple. I do like a bunch of greens, a bunch of veggies, and protein.
Yeah.
And I do ground elk,
Nice.
which is really good.
I love elk. That's one of my favorites. It's hard to get around here. I'm gonna go with this one. What's the favorite piece of gear that you own?
How about that I just have in my studio?
Yeah.
Because so that console actually isn't even mine. It's a band's that they parked at my place, which is amazing.
Yeah.
But they have a vintage LA2A that is parked here, and it's like I don't understand how it's doing what it's doing.
There are some of those.
It's just like crazy.
Yeah.
It's like it feels like it's almost doing some like multi-band compression in a way that it's balancing frequencies as it's compressing.
It's so weird how those things. I mean, we had one at Blackbird GR127, I think, is the serial. Like, I had the serial number written down forever because it was just like we always grab this one because it was
Yeah.
just like it doesn't make sense. Why does it sound like this?
Well, this one was one of the like new old stock reissues that they did in the 90s.
Ooh,
So it was like all the like stuff from fucking forever ago before they stopped manufacturing it, and then they did
yeah.
another release. And man, it like that with another vintage 1176 right behind it, like dude, it's just crazy. Also, sorry, I've said like 5 things, but
Go for it.
the BL40, the Yuri BL40, the broadcasting compressor.
Oh, I have not used one of those.
Boy, oh boy.
Really?
It's crazy. It's crazy.
Wow. So you like in place of the LA2A, not like
Nah,
in
this is like
conjunction?
external. Like for me, I use it as like external processing. Like
Oh,
I'll
okay.
run. I mean, so I have 2 of them, and I'll run like even a mono. They both hit so differently, and you cannot match them. Like it's just not going to happen.
Yeah.
So they're compressing at different times. They're hitting different
Yeah.
different frequencies at different times. So I'll send a mono signal through it to stereoize it because it's just going to
Oh.
like completely change what's happening, and it's like a different way to have a stereo feel without like, adding delay or
Yeah.
adding,
Some shifting
actual space.
Yeah. Wow. That's really interesting. I'd love to actually hear that in person. That's it for rapid fire questions. Since I'm calling this podcast One More for Safety, which is just sort of a nod to the recording industry. And if you've ever made a record, you've heard that a million fucking times because it's just tossed around. This is sort of my one more for safety question here is, I thought about this one. There's a couple different, but I think I'm going to go with if you won the lottery right now and you've got generational wealth, you don't have to worry about you or your kids. What do you do with your life? Do you continue making music? What do you do?
I would do exactly what I'm doing. I would, and I've always actually thought about that from an early age, and it was really important to me, and even more so as I've journeyed into a place of like real health for myself. That money is not an excuse to not orient your life the way you want it,
100%.
and obviously, money can expedite certain things. But man, like as far as we know, we get one life. Maybe we get multiple ones, but you only get one life of this life. I'm only Konrad one time.
Right.
And so like as the Konrad character, what the fuck do I want this life to look like? And sometimes, man, I get stuck. Sometimes I don't know. And like I kind of find myself in that place now. But even within the being stuck, man, I know that I want to exude joy and love and grace and gratitude. And man, if I won the lottery, that wouldn't change. I would still want those things. And I would still want to create. Now granted, I would probably work less. It really like I don't really do anything I don't like. So that's good. I'm lucky in that. Like I don't have any like projects where I'm like, fuck, I can't believe I have to do this.
Oh boy, I am still there.
Yeah, I
No,
mean, granted, like I'm sure I'll take stuff on, but I really try to only do things that I believe in.
Yeah.
Which man, changes the quality of life.
Yeah.
But I'd probably live somewhere a little more into nature.
Okay.
Move at a slower pace. Like I've found that I really like a slow pace. I like connecting with my body. And so I would, I would probably have more like a 3 to 4 hour workout period that's a little slower to where it's like, I could hit a sauna, I could hit an ice bath, I could do some weights, I could do yoga,
Yeah.
get a massage, you know what I mean?
Yeah,
like
yeah.
just do the things that I know it's like, hey man, you're not going to feel bad. Like if you're doing all that shit every day, there's nothing will phase you.
No.
Like somebody could come to you with the worst energy and you'd be like, oh, okay, man, I love you.
Yeah, okay.
They'd be like,
Whatever.
what is going on?
Yeah. Yeah. No.
So yeah, man, I would just keep doing what I'm doing and help, hopefully help people with that money, figure out what they want to do.
Yeah.
Because if we're all living the best life we can, man, that means everything's going to be better. If everybody's happy, everything's better.
100%. Yeah. I love that answer. That's a great answer. That's it for me, man. That's all. I'm really, really glad we got to do this. This was a lot of fun.
I really enjoyed this conversation. Thank you for continually reaching out. I kind of space a lot.
No, I'm not worried about it. I really wanted to talk to you and really wanted to have you on. I thought this would be a lot of fun, and I was really excited to do this, and it did not disappoint. So I'm really grateful that you did this, and I hope that we get to have more conversations like this, but just stay in touch in general, because I'm a big fan of what you do and how you do it. So thank you.
Brother, thank you. You too.
Appreciate it.